Imagine this for a moment. A really high-profile event. Charlie Kirk is speaking at Utah Valley University, and then he's struck by a bullet.
Yeah.
Just chaos erupts, right? Emergency services, police everywhere, and the public just waiting, desperate for answers.
Mm-hmm.
And then almost straight away, the information starts to, well, fracture. You hear reports that someone's been detained, taken into custody.
Right, that initial burst of news.
Exactly. But then maybe moments later, maybe a bit longer, word comes out that person's been released.
Okay.
And while that's happening, state officials come out with this pretty stark announcement. The shooter, still at large.
Wow.
It's genuinely head-spinning, isn't it, trying to figure out what actually happened?
It absolutely is. And you know what makes this so compelling for our discussion today is how fast it throws us into what our source document calls the loop court debate.
The loop court.
Yeah. This is based on a proprietary document titled The Charlie Kirk Shooting, Detained, Not Guilty. And this loop court idea, it's not just about conflicting facts. It's about how that first wave of information, eyewitness stuff, social media, even these conflicting official lines, it doesn't just report the event. It actively starts shaping how the public sees it, how they perceive justice in that moment.
Okay, so it's like it creates its own reality almost.
Kind of, yeah. It can create this feedback loop that pressures the investigation, maybe even prejudges things before the real facts are in.
That's a really powerful idea, this loop court. So for everyone listening, what does that mean in, like, practical terms? How does it work?
Well, think of it like this. In one of these loop court situations, those first big statements doesn't matter so much if they're totally accurate or complete, yet they create an immediate loop of public understanding and expectation.
Okay.
Then, if later on the facts gathered carefully, meticulously, if they contradict that initial loop, public trust can really take a hit.
Right, because people already know what happened.
Exactly. The verified truth struggles to break through that narrative that's already set. It becomes this kind of persistent, sometimes misinformed public trial that's running alongside the actual legal process, often clashing with it.
Wow.
It just highlights this massive challenge, trying to find the truth when the public story and the legal steps are constantly bumping up against each other, maybe even undermining each other. And just to note, this document we're drawing from was created by Devin McClarty, and it's owned by D Investment Enterprise, LLC. It really unpacks these dynamics.
Fascinating stuff. And that's really our mission today, isn't it? To unpack the big questions that pop up when these initial reports clash so badly. And to explore that tension between information moving at light speed versus the slow, careful grind needed for actual justice. It's a deep dive into public perception versus, well, reality.
So let's quickly set the scene again. What we knew or thought we knew right at the start.
Okay.
The shooting definitely happened at Utah Valley University. Charlie Kirk was confirmed as being struck during an event there. Yep. Witnesses gave pretty vivid descriptions of the shooter. Tactical gear, specifically a helmet, a mask, aviator glasses.
Very distinct look.
Very. And this person was seen, reportedly, on or near a rooftop structure, the shot, estimated from about 200 yards.
Okay.
And crucially, authorities were fast. They detained someone, a person of interest, very soon after it all went down.
Yeah.
That's the baseline info that immediately fed into that loop court.
Okay, that paints the initial picture clearly. But then, like you said, it starts to fracture almost immediately. The narrative itself becomes part of the puzzle.
Yes.
We have those core facts, but then boom, we hit these really confusing contradictions, and that just lights the fuse for the loop court.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, consider this. FBI Director Kash Patel confirmed publicly that someone was taken into custody and then released after questioning.
Which sounds standard, maybe. Investigate, no probable cause, release.
On its own, yes. But at the same time, state officials put out a statement saying pretty clearly the shooter was still at large.
Okay, wait.
Exactly. And then, just to add another layer, Governor Spencer Cox later says there was no indication of a second suspect.
Okay, this is where it gets really confusing for me, and I bet for you listening too. How can all those things be true at once?
Right.
Federal confirmation of detention and release. State saying the shooter's out there.
Yep.
Governor saying no second guy. It's not just confusing, it creates what that document calls a credibility vacuum.
That's a great term for it.
Yeah, the public is starved for a clear story,
Yeah.
so they become really vulnerable to misinterpretations, maybe even deliberate disinformation, right? And the authorities are left playing catch-up in the court of public opinion.
Precisely. And that leads us straight into everything that remains unknown, which in the loop court just becomes fuel for speculation.
Right.
The absolute core mystery, the thing driving so much debate is, Was the person they detained actually the shooter? We just don't know for sure. And those conflicting statements, they just muddy it all up.
And beyond that,
Kind of.
completely up in the air. Was it political, ideological, something totally different, personal?
We have no idea.
And with no confirmed suspect, the identity question is huge. No verified name, no background shared publicly. That just leaves a bigger void.
Correct. And that lack of info stretches to the really crucial stuff, the forensic confirmation that the legal system needs.
Like the weapon, ballistics.
Exactly. Key evidence is missing, or at least not public. Recovering the weapon, getting ballistics to match it to the bullet that hit Kirk, pinpointing the exact spot the shot came from.
All vital pieces.
Absolutely vital for a solid conclusion. But they're outside the public view, letting the loop court fill in the blanks with guesswork.
And then there's the accomplice question. Lone wolf. Or were others involved? Planning? Escape, maybe?
Another huge unknown.
All these unanswered questions, they create incredibly fertile ground for exactly this kind of loop court debate we're diving into. It just perfectly highlights that tension, doesn't it? The public's hunger for answers now versus the methodical pace justice requires.
Absolutely. And thinking about it through this loop court framework really helps us sort through these tricky points, especially when justice is under such intense public pressure like it was here. Those first bits of info, even incomplete, they formed a really powerful first loop in people's minds.
Okay, so let's tackle our first debate point. This one's fundamental, legally, but often gets blurred on the public eye. Detained guilty.
Right.
Someone was detained, yes, but then released. Why is that distinction so absolutely critical, especially in this loop court environment?
Well, this is where that loop court pressure really starts to bite. Legally, the principle is clear. Releasing someone after questioning strongly suggests there wasn't enough probable cause to hold them.
Okay, the legal bar wasn't met.
Exactly. If the evidence isn't strong enough for continued detention, legally, they have to be released. But in the public mind, announcing a detention early on, even if it was legally justified at that moment, can sort of detain that person in public perception.
Ah, I see. So the label sticks.
It can, yeah. So when they're released later even, because there just wasn't enough evidence, it can look like a mistake by the authorities or a failure or even, some kind of cover-up.
Right. It feeds suspicion rather than clarifying things.
It does. It ramps up the public demand for instant answers
Yeah.
and can sort of prematurely close that loop of suspicion around that individual, no matter their actual legal innocence at that point.
So it's not just about what's legal, it's about what feels just to the public and how easily those two can diverge, which leads us right into the second debate point. The huge risk of public pressure and misinformation, especially with conflicting official statements flying around.
Indeed. That conflict we talked about, FBI saying detained release, state officials saying shooter at large, it had a clear, immediate effect. It chips away at public trust, potentially quite dramatically. When official sources seem to contradict each other, it doesn't just confuse people, it actively breeds skepticism. It can fuel misinformation spreading like wildfire. That becomes central to the loop court.
So it raises a really tough question for law enforcement, doesn't it? Should they maybe hold back on public statements until the evidence is solid, until they have a unified story?
That's the dilemma.
Or does waiting just create an even bigger information vacuum that speculation or bad actors will happily fill?
It's a massive challenge. And what happens when political pressure or just the sheer public demand for something pushes authorities to announce details too quickly, maybe prioritizing a fast narrative over a thorough, accurate one? The loop court just thrives in that kind of environment where the immediate story overshadows the verified facts.
It sounds like an incredibly difficult tightrope for authorities to walk. You've got the public demanding answers, demanding transparency, especially in a case like this.
Right, high profile.
But on the other hand, rushing information or putting out an incomplete picture can seriously damage someone's reputation, maybe even compromise the investigation itself. And that brings us neatly to debate point 3. That constant tension between the presumption of innocence, a cornerstone of the legal system, and those demands for transparency.
This is such a delicate balance, and it's often really contentious, particularly framed by this loop court idea. How much should the public be told right at the start of an investigation? Especially when the facts are still coming together, things are fluid.
Yeah.
We want to keep people informed, maybe calm fears, but you also have to protect the integrity of the investigation itself and, crucially, the rights of anyone who might be involved.
So what safeguards are there? Or maybe what safeguards should there be to prevent misidentification in these big cases? You need to protect the investigation, sure, but also protect the reputations of potentially innocent people.
And that tension is just amplified when the loop court is already spinning, right? Public opinion forms fast, sometimes way ahead of the actual evidence. That puts immense pressure on due process itself.
And speaking of public perception and early info, those initial reports really leaned heavily on eyewitness accounts. Which brings us to debate point 4. How reliable are eyewitnesses and surveillance, especially as inputs into this loop court?
Yeah, that's crucial.
We had those incredibly detailed descriptions, didn't we? The tactical gear, helmet, mask, aviator glasses. It painted a very clear picture for the public right away.
It did.
Yep.
And that's exactly why we need to be critical about it. How reliable, truly, are eyewitness accounts given under extreme stress, panic?
Like during a shooting. Our memory can play tricks on us then, right?
Well, absolutely. It can be incredibly fallible. Psychology tells us about things like weapon focus, where a witness zones in on the weapon and their memory for other details, like the person holding it, gets fuzzy.
Interesting.
And there's also the risk of post-event misinformation. Maybe hearing descriptions from others or seeing things on social media can actually change your own memory without you even realizing it. So are those vivid descriptions always going to line up perfectly with forensic evidence found later? Not necessarily. Sometimes a kind of collective story emerges, even if individual memories were flawed or varied.
And in the loop court, those compelling early accounts, they set a kind of public truth that's really hard to shift later, even if new evidence emerges that casts doubt.
Exactly. They become incredibly sticky narratives.
Okay. So pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, our listener? You're the informed citizen trying to navigate this flood of information. This deep dive into the Charlie Kirk case, especially looking through this loop court lens, it really seems to highlight that huge difference between the immediate info, the stuff that hits our feeds instantly, often conflicting, often unverified, and the slow, careful process of getting actual, verified, factual evidence.
It really does. And hopefully it encourages all of us to practice critical thinking, to question sources, even official ones, especially when their stories don't quite line up.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that the wheels of justice often turn slowly, deliberately, and sometimes, especially early on, they turn out of the public eye for very sound reasons.
It's not necessarily a flaw in the system.
No, often it's a feature. It's designed to protect the integrity of the process, to protect rights, precisely against the pressures of that instant loop court.
This whole situation really does shine a light on the massive complexities authorities are juggling, doesn't it? They're trying to run a high-stakes investigation while dealing with intense media focus and public demand.
Yeah, it's immense pressure.
They're trying to stick to legal principles like presumption of innocence, but also satisfy that public hunger for immediate answers. It's like a constant battle against the pull of the loop court.
It's an incredibly challenging environment.
Yeah.
Every single public statement gets put under a microscope, and it can have huge consequences, not just for the case, but for public faith in the justice system itself. So understanding this loop court dynamic helps us see why these things happen and maybe approach these situations with a more informed, patient perspective.
So, recapping then, we've seen today just how quickly things can get tangled up in conflicting stories, even when authorities act fast and presumably with the best intentions. That journey from someone being detained to actually being found guilty, it's long. It's paved with due process, with careful evidence work. It's not just about those initial announcements or the assumptions fueled by the loop court.
The focus really has to stay on the process, making sure all the evidence is gathered properly, analyzed meticulously before any final conclusions are drawn, not just giving in to the pressure for quick answers.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to take away and think about. In this age we live in, where information travels instantly and the public demand for answers is relentless, immediate, how much unknown are we actually comfortable with?
Yeah, that's the question.
Especially when justice is hanging in the balance and that loop court is always running in the background. It's definitely something worth pondering as we watch future events unfold in our hyper-connected world.